When I was in high school, I babysat for my job, but by babysitting for my job, it was 40 hours a week all summer plus weekends, and like that's legitimately what I did. And as soon as I graduated, I had 3 jobs at any given point in time, and at least one of those was full-time. I've never wanted to have to depend on anyone else for my own livelihood.
Work and working is like a core value, or hard work,
Yeah.
right? I think that's a core value. I think effort is important. How would you describe your core values?
I've never thought about that question.
Working 40-hour weeks babysitting while still in high school, Margette Hepfner learned early that she'd never depend on anyone else for her livelihood. Now, as Chief Operating Officer of Willowbridge, she's channeled that relentless work ethic into a 25-year multifamily career, recently leading the company through a big transition and its first rebrand in nearly 6 decades. A natural storyteller with an eye for spotting talent, she's built her success on reading rooms and closing deals.
When I look at my childhood, I don't think I had anything given to me. So I had every desire in the world to be successful at whatever it was that I chose to do.
What makes you so ambitious as a person?
Ooh, that really depends.
Great. Margette, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with where we normally start. I want to start with a favorite childhood memory of yours.
Oh gosh, that's hard. Favorite childhood memory. I haven't thought about anything like that in a long time. Am I allowed to ask you questions?
You can ask
Tell
me
me
questions.
your favorite childhood memory.
My favorite childhood memory. It is a good one.
See, I know it's a hard thing.
Okay. I think my favorite childhood memory is my dad. When we were living in San Jose, California, he had a motorcycle, and every day after work, he would go to the gym, and then usually come back at 6:30 or 7. And I remember him, I lived in a cul-de-sac, and I remember him driving the motorcycle down. And you could hear it from outside, and coming into the driveway. And then randomly, we would also go on rides. I don't know why that popped in my head, but it's probably that. He got into like a serious accident and broke his like collarbone and ribs, and my mom was like, "You're not getting a motorcycle after that." But
did he get a motorcycle after that?
He wasn't allowed to. Yeah.
Have you ever gotten a motorcycle?
No.
For that reason?
I'm like very risk averse. I feel like my theory here is like I'm like weirdly not risk averse with like work, but like with my health, like I'm like super not risk averse, and I'd trade adventure for like safety. So,
okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's fair. That makes
Just because
sense.
I'm like I don't want to like go skiing and like get a concussion and die. Like I don't know. I'm just like
you could get a concussion and die from skiing.
That's true. Okay, let's do another question.
Okay.
Let me ask you, what was your childhood like more broadly? Where did you grow up?
Sure. So I was born in Denver. My parents actually owned a macrame company in the 70s, if you know what macrame is. You know, the wall hangings and like plant holders that are made out of yarn and beads and that kind of stuff from the 70s. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No idea. So everyone needs to Google macrame. But they owned a macrame company. I had an older brother and me. We lived in West Denver. They would ride their bikes to the studio that had this old rope-drawn elevator, legit rope-drawn elevator. And then when they got pregnant with my younger brother, my dad decided, okay, this macrame thing's not going to cut it to raise 3 children.
So you're a middle child?
I'm a middle child. Yep.
Okay.
Older brother, younger brother. And my dad went back to school to get his first got his real estate license, finished his bachelor's, and got into commercial real estate appraising. And the real estate market across the country was pretty terrible in the late 70s, early 80s, but it was less terrible in Dallas. So my parents I was 5 years old. They packed up the house, packed up the car, 3 kids, a dog, and we drove to Dallas. No job. Dad wasn't quite sure what he was going to do, but found a job within about 2 weeks, and we settled in Dallas, and I've been here ever since.
So how old were you when you...
6. I was 5 when I was 5.
Okay. Wow, so
Started
you've been in
first
Dallas
grade.
ever since.
I have been in Dallas ever since. You know, I wouldn't have said that Dallas, if I had to pick a place to live, I don't know that Dallas would have ever been it. One of the things that I've grown to love about Dallas is that it's a city of transplants. It's a great real estate market. It is so easy to travel from. So I've covered the country in multifamily real estate since 2006 and started traveling for work in about 2004. It's very easy to travel from. The people are nice, relatively inexpensive cost of living in comparison to other major cities. I mean, it's become home.
How have you seen Dallas change over the last couple decades?
For the most part, when you look at the definition of suburban sprawl, that is absolutely the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. When we moved here in 1981, I've always had a love affair with cities, and I cannot even begin to tell you why. But from the time I was a kid, just to walk the streets of a downtown area was just kind of mesmerizing. You see a little bit of history, to see the tall buildings and just the differences in people that are inside the city centers. And they're so vastly different than the suburbs anywhere you go. And it's funny that that's something that I picked up on at a pretty young age and something I thankfully learned to appreciate at a pretty young age. And then kind of we lived in Cedar Hill, which is south of Dallas, and then we moved east of Dallas, and then I've been in the city of Dallas, lived in the city of Dallas for more than 20 years now. I would say for the most part, the city itself, downtown Dallas was just a business district. You did not live in the city. You definitely didn't live in Uptown, and to see that shift over the last, and it's been 20 to 25 years, to see that shift it's been pretty great to watch and to actually be a part of, because Dallas was more of a suburban city versus an urban city. And it's been fun to be kind of part of that. And then we've also seen, I don't know what the stats are today, but the number of people that are moving into the Dallas-Fort Worth area on a daily basis is absolutely insane.
Yeah. I want to go back to, I'm also a middle child.
Yeah.
Are you close to your siblings?
I'm very close to my younger brother. I'm not as close to my older brother.
How are you guys similar and different?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So 2 brothers, I'm 4 years younger than the oldest, and I'm 4 years older than my youngest. My mom's an artist. My dad is a real estate numbers person. I'm much more like my dad. And I would say, being 4 years older than my younger brother, I actually kind of parented him a little bit maybe coach is probably a better word versus parent. I'm a pretty perceptive person and have always been moderately outgoing, at least, and comfortable in uncomfortable situations, or comfortable kind of out of my comfort zone and element.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you say perceptive, what does that mean to you?
You know, when people say you should be able to read the room when you walk into a room. Some people, I feel like I can actually trust my gut pretty well. Maybe a little less trusting of people sometimes, but I can trust my gut pretty well and read a room really well. So I actually learned that from watching my dad. So when I would go to work with my dad when I was a kid, and I'd watch him, and he paid close attention to people when he was talking to him, and always made eye contact. And I learned that sometimes it's uncomfortable to make eye contact with people, because you feel like maybe they're seeing something in your personality or your emotions, but it actually makes you listen to people, and I think that makes you a more perceptive person as well. So when you read the room, you feel things about the room, you notice people's body language, you have a tendency to listen more and talk less. So that's what I mean when I say perceptive.
Is being perceptive different than being intuitive?
I think they're probably, to me, intuition is your gut, and it's You're born with it. It's one of those talent things. We all have a talent. And then perception, I believe, can be learned. You can be intuitive and actually not as perceptive. You don't listen to your intuition. So the perception makes you listen to your intuition, in my opinion.
Okay.
So similar, but they have to work together. And if you don't have the intuition, the perception is just going to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've been thinking a lot about intuition. I think as like when I first started my company, I was super focused on just like just listening to my head, and just like getting things done and being like, I'm not like what I didn't. Intuition just sounded so fluffy, right? I didn't really understand it. And as I've like sat into building this company and getting more experience, I've kind of realized that like sometimes intuition gives you like step function ideas and changes in your business that you never would have thought, because it's just coming from true creativity. But then when I also think about intuition, sometimes I'm like, well, is it just like an amalgamation of all my experiences, and like based on your experiences, like that's intuition?
It can be. So I'll tell you a funny story. I love like suspense, murder mystery kind of stuff, right? And I don't mean not horror, like actual just suspense murder mystery. So when you think about television shows that have historically been on, anything like Law and Order, CSI, anything like that, Dateline, so real life kind of murder mystery type things. I love those kinds of shows. And I think that it has helped me be more perceptive, because it helps you realize that there's a world out there that doesn't necessarily make sense. And I actually think it helps you hone your intuition. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And the reason why I'm smiling is I was talking to our mutual friend, Sherry, and she was telling me that you love storytelling, especially at dinners. So I feel like I have to ask you now, do you have a story that you want to share that's just really interesting?
Oh, gosh. I do love storytelling, and I think that it was a learned thing for me. So from two perspectives, growing up and then early in my career, as I watched people and got to know people that I wanted to emulate, and as I was kind of building who I felt like I wanted to be and building my career and figuring out my own path, I've always been drawn to people who are storytellers. And the more I paid attention and the more you learn about it, the reason that humans are drawn to storytellers is, I would say, a few things. But when you're telling a story, it humanizes you to your audience. It lets you... It makes it okay for you to be vulnerable, and I think human nature, especially as a leader in a company or leading anything, we have a tendency to not to want to try to hide our vulnerabilities. But when your team, your peers, your friends, strangers, your audience see that you are also vulnerable just like they are, it makes you more relatable. So I learned how to tell stories. You figure out your inflection in your voice, and the best rule of thumb, and you think about it from a couple of different angles, but if you have a large audience, most of the people in the audience probably don't know who you are. You might have 10% of the audience who knows you and they absolutely love you, and you could say or do anything and they would think that you're the greatest thing in the world. There's easily 10% that just doesn't like you at all. And same thing. You could say or do anything, and it doesn't matter what it is, they're never going to like you. And knowing that you're appealing to 3 different audiences at any given point in time, and the goal is not to try to sway any one of those audiences in a different way. It's to evoke some sort of emotion from them. So it's if you can make someone laugh and cry and maybe even be a little afraid or something along those lines when you're telling a story, that's success.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend yesterday about he posted something about he asked ChatGPT what are the like most resilient jobs in a post AGI world, and it was a bunch of things. It was like being a social worker, a therapist, all of this. But the general theme was like human connection, things that like have human connection. And he loves all this stuff. So I actually messaged him. I was like, what do you think is going to happen in podcasting? And I think his answer was actually very accurate. It was podcasts that focus more on information will probably face close to demise, because with AI, when you communicate information, you can communicate it in a way that's more succinctly. But I think podcasts that are more focused on human connection and authenticity and storytelling are going to thrive, because I think if you think about like what's been around since the dawn of time, it's stories, right?
Yeah.
And that's every generation. Like you hear stories from the previous generation. It's almost the longest living, not living, but longest thing that is part of humanity.
Of course it is, because how else can you pass any information on from generation to generation?
Exactly.
It's
yeah.
storytelling.
So going back to your like upbringing, what was it like with like you said, so your dad was a real estate agent. What did your mom?
My dad was a commercial real estate appraiser.
Commercial real estate appraiser, okay.
Does a lot of work for, commercial buildings, land, the Texas Department of Transportation, for example. So surveying and appraising land that the state is attempting to buy, maybe even eminent domain. So buying land from people to put roads in, that kind of stuff.
Did you have a challenging childhood?
Yeah. No.
No?
I don't think so.
What makes you so ambitious as a person? The reason why I ask that is like I feel like many, and there's obviously explanations for everything, but like most people I've met are very ambitious because they have some like challenging childhood.
Yeah.
I guess like what drives you and why are you so ambitious?
So, I think it's a great question. I've always believed that almost any one of us could could make our childhoods dramatic in some form or fashion, right? So raised by, my parents were still married, dad in commercial real estate, my mom's an artist. She stayed home with us. I would say we were middle class at best when I was young. When I was in early elementary school, we were probably just barely above the poverty line. I went to public schools. I went to my undergrad at a public college as well, because just couldn't afford anything more. So when I look at my childhood, I don't think I had anything given to me. So I had every desire in the world to be successful at whatever it was that I chose to do. I genuinely can't tell you why. I like to be busy. When I was in high school, I babysat for my job, but by babysitting for my job, it was 40 hours a week all summer plus weekends, and like that's legitimately what I did. And as soon as I graduated, I had 3 jobs at any given point in time, and at least one of those was full-time. Worked at Blockbuster, Victoria's Secret, and an eye doctor's office all at the same time while going to school. And to me, they were all challenging. I enjoyed working with people. Not really afraid of failure, I guess, if you will, and trying to working the 3 different jobs and going to school helped me learn what I liked, maybe what I didn't like, what I was good at, where I wanted to take my career. Not that I really knew when I got out of school, but you figure it out. Maybe watching my dad. My dad's always was up early and always working and fairly driven to feed a family and make sure that we all were better off than they were. I think sometimes it's just something inherent in you. I've never wanted to have to depend on anyone else for my own livelihood.
What do you think happens when you're not busy? Why do you like to be busy? Have you ever thought about that?
I like to be productive, maybe is the better word.
What do you feel like when you're not productive?
I definitely do take time to like relax, to read, to unwind, to just time to veg out, watch TV. So I don't feel like I'm not afraid of it. It just doesn't, it's boring. Maybe that's a better word for it.
Yeah.
It's just
So
boring.
You like there's dopamine associated with like getting things done,
Absolutely.
doing things. It feels good.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, same. That's
Yeah. Just to accomplish something whatever it is. Yes, it feels good.
Yeah. Would you consider yourself like a creative person? It sounds like you said you're more closely aligned with your dad and your mom as an artist who's probably more creative.
When you think about learned talent and like God-given talent, I don't think I was born creative by any means at all whatsoever. I just grew up around it. My mom being an artist and extremely talented at all things that she does from an art perspective, helped me have an appreciation for it. Same thing with music. I cannot sing for the "you do not want me to sing" ever. Karaoke it's comical. But to me, it helped me find an appreciation for those who are musically inclined and talented. So I have an eye for it and I have an ear for it. I just don't. I don't feel like it's not natural to me. If I were try to come up with something creative or fun or to even writing, I'll ultimately get there. It's just going to take me a long time to get there.
So you mentioned you didn't seek out multifamily.
I did not.
You did not, as many people didn't.
No.
What did you study in college, and then what was the path to actually like entering this industry?
I did. I knew that I was always interested in real estate. I love
Because of your dad?
because of my dad. But then I just like real estate. It's interesting to me. Land development's interesting to me. People's behavior and thought process about, you hear about NIMBYism, not in my backyard. So just the thought process behind human behavior and not wanting development, human behavior and wanting development. Just watching all of that was fascinating to me. I got my residential real estate license while I was in college, and I worked in residential real estate while I was going through school as well. But I knew I wasn't interested in being a residential realtor. Just was not. I knew it wasn't my cup of tea. I wanted to get into commercial real estate, and if you had asked me at that point, it was trying to find a path to brokerage in commercial real estate. But you can't just graduate from college and go straight into being a broker. Like there's so much more around it. So I did take quite a few real estate classes, have an associate's in real estate, and then have my bachelor's in just business from University of Texas at Dallas. It's just business. I mean, but I knew real estate, some form, some fashion.
So what was your first job when you entered the industry?
My first job, I went to a job fair with my cousin who was also looking for a job. I did not want to go to the job fair, but I went to the job fair with her, and it was set up pretty well. It was in like a hotel with suites where the companies were all doing actual interviews there at the job fair. And the apartment guide, if you're familiar with the apartment guide from back in the day, heard some interesting news about them today. But the apartment guide was set up in one of the booth suites, whatever, and they were interviewing for outside sales reps, and I had absolutely zero desire at all whatsoever to go sell advertising for the apartment guide. But I knew that I was interviewing with companies for interview practice, and I felt like a sales role would be a great interview practice because I was not planning on going into sales. Like, why not? What do I have to lose? I went to the interview, and there were a number of us interviewing for the same position. So you I mean, it was like what you see on literally TV show,
Yeah,
right? Like
everybody's
you
standing
see
in
the
line.
other people in the waiting room that are interviewing, and I'm highly competitive. And I decided that I wanted the job because I was smarter than everyone else in the room. I kid you not. So I was interviewing with Mike Parker, who is still in the industry. And at the end of the interview, I asked him what next steps were. And he said, you'll come in and you'll meet with Kevin Telfer, and then we'll make a decision. And I closed with, okay, great. Can we go ahead and set that up? And he called Kevin, and we set up the next meeting. And I walked out, and I'm like, I definitely have this job. But literally only because I'm competitive and I wanted to beat everyone else.
So you basically set up the next interview.
I did. I set up the next.
them.
Yep, absolutely.
That's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah.
I wonder if people should do that. Like,
You
on
should
the
do
interview,
that.
It's like, what's the
You
next
have
steps?
to close. You
Yeah.
always have to close.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes you so nervous because they could say no, or you don't know how they're going to respond, but you have to always close.
The crazy thing.
Ask for what you want.
The crazy thing about that is, like, imagine like you asked what are next steps. He might have just been giving you an answer.
Correct.
He could have just been like, oh, like, nah, I'm not really excited about Margette. Like, you
Yeah.
know.
He
But
could have been.
He could have been, because he probably, well, I wasn't in the room, but like, if somebody asked me next steps, I would say, oh yeah, probably you meet with this person, but you're still thinking about the candidate. You're not
Sure.
committing yes or no.
Correct.
But you basically like force that outcome to happen.
And he called him and he interrupted his interview with someone else.
That is really cool.
And we said it.
And that's also in some ways like very applicable to the role, right? With sales,
Very
is
much
like
so.
closing, making sure you're like moving things forward.
Yep. You have to ask for what you want.
Yeah.
And the reason we don't is because we're afraid that we might get no. But we're better off with the no right now, so you just don't even have to think about it. Great. If the answer was no, I'm on to the next, and it's not even an afterthought other than what could I have done differently to make the answer yes.
Exactly. Like when I was first starting this company, I was obviously the first salesperson and sales rep. It was me and my co-founder, and we did this crazy thing where we were like, we're not going to leave. We moved to a different city. We went to, it was Palm Springs, so it was really nice in the winter. But we're like, we're not going to go back until we like get our first customer. So like every morning I would like write down, I would be cold calling because I didn't know anybody in the industry. I didn't know anything. But I'd be cold calling, and what I would do is I'd gamify the rejection.
Okay.
So I basically associated like dopamine with the rejection. So every time I'd get a rejection, I'd like tally it.
Okay.
And then it was like, it became kind of fun because I was like, oh, like the tallies are growing.
Yeah.
Like this is getting higher.
Yeah.
And I think there's like small things like that to your point about like being okay with no's, and also just figuring out how to like gamify things and make it fun. And whether you're in sales, whether you're in any other role, because it's
Yeah.
part of it. Like you're not going to escape rejection.
Yeah. No, you're not. And you find a way. It helps you learn how to get to yes, whether it was with one of the no's or eventually leads you to more yeses as you continue to pitch your business and your products.
Totally. And I like personally, in some ways, I actually really like rejection and failure, because I think there's a lot of information in rejection
Absolutely.
and failure.
And
With
you have
success.
to ask, you have to follow up and ask, right? Like, and oddly enough, while it likely does make people uncomfortable, most people are happy to share, and they'll be honest with you if you're being honest and asking why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this, I don't know if you've read it or heard of her, but there's this book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. She's like a poker player.
Uh-huh.
And it's really interesting. I was saying there's a lot of information in failure, but also there's a lot of information in like success. And I think if you don't understand, like let's say you cold called somebody and you managed to book a meeting, but your process was like totally wrong, but you got lucky because they were really wanting to talk to you at that point.
Sure.
You have to be there's also information in success. You have to understand why it was successful.
Yeah.
Because you could be successful, but like you got lucky in some way.
Right.
So you have to understand like the inputs that lead to
That's true.
success.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's
I
very
just thought
true.
about that. Okay, cool. So you were at Apartment Guide for a while, right?
I was. So ultimately, 13 years. I left for a very short period of time. I was offered a role with a company called Belo Interactive that's here local to Dallas. Belo, I don't know if they still do, but they owned the Dallas Morning News at the time. And they owned, 30 some odd television stations across the country, a number of different newspapers. They were a part of a venture group that was a conglomeration of newspapers across the country. So wildly successful company, obviously in the age of people having questions around print, marketing, advertising, readership, that kind of thing. And they started a company called Belo Interactive that was the interactive agency for all of their newspapers and television stations across the country. And I thought it was really exciting to be at the ground floor. There were like 75 employees of this ultimately huge company and lots of potential. And I was about 5 months into the role, and I learned a ton with that team and on that with that company. I was about 5 months in, and Robert Turnbull, who was still at the Apartment Guide, called me, and they were creating 3 new positions called Internet Marketing Executives. So it's 2004, kind of set the stage for the time. And the goal was Apartment Guide was trying to sell this internet thing and convince both internally and externally that this .com thing was actually going to be around and that there was value to advertising on the internet, because the perception at that point was that internet advertising was dirt cheap, right? But there's actually a lot of value around the internet advertising. So my role was to work with our internal teams and starting to do presentations and like public speaking with larger groups, either at apartment associations or large clients, and teaching them about this, why the internet's important, why you have to put pictures online, it was, so I did that for about 2 years. And we identified that pretty quickly that we needed some sort of national sales platform. So the Apartment Guide was in 85 markets across the country, and every single market was its own P&L, which meant that there was no cross-selling from market to market. So if there was a relationship with like Lincoln in Dallas, making the connection to if Lincoln had properties in Chicago or Boston, the person in Dallas had no connection to that. It meant that Lincoln had no discount. It meant that if there was a decision maker for Lincoln that spanned across 6 markets, they had to work with 6 different people. So I and Robert helped me build it, but we put together a plan to pitch to our leadership that we should develop a national sales platform at Apartment Guide, and they agreed, and I had the opportunity to build the plan, build the sales team, and then I ran that sales team for 7 years.
I want to talk about your husband.
Yeah,
He's
sure.
also in multifamily.
Yes.
Did you guys meet in multifamily?
We did.
Okay.
Yep, we did.
How did that happen?
The very first time that I actually saw him, it was, I don't know, my first week or so working with the Apartment Guide. There were lots of apartment association events, especially at night. I feel like they've shifted a little bit, but at least once a month there was some sort of event. And in February of every year, the Apartment Association of Greater Dallas holds a PAC auction to raise money for their political action committee. And an auction, if you've ever been to a live auctions are, they're a lot of fun, but only if the auctioneers are good at what they do, right? So there were it's Tom Day and Jim Heffner were the 2 auctioneers. And I genuinely remember watching the 2 of them, and specifically watching Jim, thinking, okay, great storyteller, great auctioneer, and was just really impressed and mesmerized by him. And it turns out he was actually the president of the National Apartment Association at that point in time, so he was hosting and emceeing a lot of the events. So I watched him from afar for years, and we happened to get introduced through Tom. He happened to be kind of a client, owned real estate, and finally actually met maybe in 2005 and started dating, and I mean, that's it.
So he's a pretty prominent figure in the industry, or what? He retired?
He's failed retirement a few times, but
He's failed retirement a few times.
He is mostly retired, yes.
What have you, like, I guess, what have you learned from him, and like, what has that, like, dynamic been with both of you guys working in the same industry?
Yeah, so I've learned our relationship has taught me a ton, and for a number of different reasons. I would say first and foremost, patience. And I say patience for two reasons. So he's 28 years older than I am, and it's not 28-year age difference doesn't work for a lot of people. And patience in getting to know each other and getting to know each other's friends and each other's families, and patience that we wouldn't necessarily be accepted immediately by each other's friends and families because of the age difference and just differences of personalities and things. So patience from that perspective. It also helped me to create better boundaries, or to learn to create boundaries that were important in work and life. So there were, especially early in my career and early in our relationship, we were at many of the same events together, and we weren't there as a couple. We were there as both in business for different reasons and supporting each other, but supporting each other a little bit from afar, and not there as a couple, which is, it can be an interesting dynamic, and I don't know that it would work for a lot of people, and it actually works really well for the two of us. He's definitely my rock. He's been a mentor for me. We both keep each other's egos in check. And I would say it's also like we're equals, and there are times where one of us has to take the lead, but it's not ever the same one of us taking the lead. So it's just like, it's one of the, if I had to write a book, or I could write a book about relationships, it literally would be all about Jim and I, and just learning that you can find someone who is your equal, that it is okay for you not to always agree on things, that arguing is actually fine and healthy and not the end of the world. But at the end of the day, you support each other and your families. Like, it is, yeah. Literally, when people say I found my person, he's my person.
That's amazing. Is it possible to be in a relationship with different core values? From your perspective?
Ooh, that really depends. I don't think they can be, you can't have opposing core values. And I don't know that your core values have to all have the same weight, but I think you have to have the same values. You have to value the same things.
How would you describe your core values?
Never thought about that question. I have no idea.
Maybe a better way to phrase it is like, what matters to you, I guess. Like, for example, for me, I think work is like, work and working is like a core value, or hard work.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's a core value. I think effort is important. I think working smart has a time and place, and you absolutely should, but I don't think it should supplant like working hard.
Yeah,
right? I think
that's fair.
I believe in working hard. Another value of mine is I believe in like being vulnerable and authentic. Like I don't necessarily agree with the fact that like as a leader you have to like kind of like always fake and front things. I think similar to you.
Yeah.
It's just easier also to just actually say what you think and express yourself, at least for me. I think there's challenges because like you do put yourself in positions where you can get taken advantage of, and I'd be lying if I said that didn't happen to me. But I think in aggregate, it's like worth it. And it's just easier to express yourself.
Work ethic is a big one for me. Honesty and integrity are also extremely important. And I would say that the honesty, integrity, and work ethic are like deal breakers for me. Like those are just things that, especially if you're working together or in any kind of relationship, there's always give and take, but those are just things, if you can't trust someone, and you don't feel comfortable being honest with someone that you work with, that you're in any kind of business relationship, personal relationship with, it's just not going to be successful. I think it's important to be open and accepting of other people's thoughts and opinions, and we don't have to all think the same way. There are absolutely times that you can agree to disagree. I also think it's important that you can't just say let's agree to disagree when one of you is just flat out wrong, because sometimes there is a right and there is a wrong. And just being able to see that and understand that. Punctuality is probably another one. And I'll define that a little bit more. So it's just setting expectations. It's okay to be late, start early, run over, as long as you're checking in with the audience, with your team, with those that are participating in whatever meeting. And if you're going to be late, is that okay? And we'll still stop at the same time. Sitting in a meeting, if you're, let's say, you started on time, great. The time for the meeting to end is at 3:00, and 3:00 comes and goes, and the person facilitating the meeting hasn't even recognized that, hey, we've gone over, and hey, do you mind if we go another 5 minutes or another 10 minutes, right? Like just so punctuality in your schedule and your structure, and not just assuming that everyone else is going to be okay if you start early, run late, end early.
That makes a lot of sense. Sorry for running 5 minutes late.
No, I knew you were going to say that. I didn't mean that
I'm
at
saying
all
it as a joke.
whatsoever.
No, it's fair, and it's true. I know we have a couple minutes, and I do want
Yeah.
to ask you just one more question. There's a big transition with Lincoln and Willowbridge. Can you just talk about that for a few minutes and what that was like, and then maybe just tell us also like if that was like one of the most challenging things you've done in your career, or if there's another moment that comes to mind.
Yeah, so I would say, so we were founded actually on February 12th, 1965. So today is our 60th anniversary.
Wow.
As a company. And we were literally owned by two guys. Tim Byrne and Mac Pogue owned us, just the two of them, 50-50 until 2019. So in I'm sure Tim and Mac probably started talking about it long before 2018, but they wanted to position the company to continue after the two of them decided to retire. And when two people own a company, you can't just appoint a new CEO. It doesn't work that way. So they wanted to find an investor, a buyer that would invest in part of the company in 2019 with the option and the expectation to close on the balance of the company by June 1st of 2023. And I was fortunate enough to be at the table and be part of that process where we had the opportunity to pick our buyer. Most companies can't say that. They don't usually have a seat at the table as they're looking for their buyer and get to partner with their new ownership for 4+ years before they become your new owners. So again, we were fortunate to have a seat at the table and to pick our new owners and work alongside them from 2019 until 2023 when they closed on us. So it's been right about 2 years since Cadillac Fairview Ontario Teachers Pension Plan closed on us. And we knew back in 2019 that we would have to change the Lincoln name at some point. There were hopes and expectations that we would be able to keep it longer than we did. But once we closed in February of 23, we knew that we had to get started on the project. So I was, again, fortunate to be asked to lead that project, which was talk about being out of your comfort zone and nervous on a regular basis. It was playing chess every day with 4 or 5 different chessboards, because we had this name Lincoln for 58 years that lots of people were attached to. Scott Wilder's our president. He's been with the company 40 years. We have a lot of tenure in there. We were all attached to that Lincoln name and Lincoln brand. But we knew we had to change it. So putting the team together, talking through what we would be okay with and what we wouldn't be okay with when it came to a name. So for example, trademarking a name was the most important. So finding a word that we could trademark that was an actual word and an actual name versus an imaginary or creative word or name like Google, right? We decided we're not Google. We're tangible, we're a real estate company. Our name had to be something that was an actual word in the English dictionary, which was hard, makes it really hard, because if you're trying to trademark something. But starting from there at that point, and then the hardest part, aside from finding the right name that was going to resonate with everyone, was inventorying all of our properties and all of our offices. Do you know how many places the Lincoln name and the Lincoln brand lived? And
It's
having to literally flip a switch and put a team together so that all of our on-site teams felt on October 2nd they were Lincoln, and October 3rd they were Willowbridge. Just like overnight, flip of a switch. We changed all of our email addresses by that weekend. It was an intense 2 weeks to get everyone changed over to the Willowbridge brand so they felt like they were the new company. It was probably the hardest part of it, and lots of emotion around it, but also pretty exciting. Picked the color purple, which people were, I know, it's our anniversary. I had to wear purple. People didn't love purple, but when you look at the real estate market, none of our competitors are purple. There's lots of red, there's blue, there's green, there's no purple. So thinking about how we would stand out, and then the attachment. So the name, do you know the history of the name?
I don't.
Mac Pogue, who started us, his very first property that he built had the name, it was Willow Wick here in Dallas. The next 2 properties had the name Willow in the name of the property, but he loved willow trees. So everything about our history talked about a willow tree, and it was the strength and foundation that the roots and the tree itself has, with the flexibility to adjust and be agile with the wind, like the limbs of the willow tree have. The willow tree was on our Gold Medallion Award, so there are lots of employees that have watches and necklaces and rings with the willow on it. So that's where willow came from. And then bridge was the bridge from who we were to who we are now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I actually had no idea about that. That's really cool.
It really is. It is a great story. So it was so important to us to make sure that we kept that connection to our history, to Lincoln, to who we are and who we were, to Mac Pogue, but then signify to everyone, our employees, the industry, our clients, our residents, that we're taking a step forward.
Margette, I want to thank you for running a couple minutes early and dealing with me being a couple minutes late.
It's totally fine. I appreciate this. I really enjoy being invited.
Yeah, no, this was really fun. Thank you for sharing, and I'm excited for this to be released.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.